All right, so jumping into it, everyone, welcome to the second video of Road to a Six-Figure Data Science Job with Richard. I don't know if that's our main title or if that's going to continue to be our official title, but let's just go with it. On our last video, Richard created an account on Interview Query. He went over his background and basically how he became interested in data science and why he kind of quit his last job. We essentially had Richard create an account on Interview Query with his preferred positions. We went over a radar chart that basically showed his skill level and for his goal of reaching his positions of data scientist, machine learning, data analytics. And then essentially we assigned a few tasks for him to measure his skills on different areas so that he could figure out maybe which position he prefers more and exactly what his skill level was on these different kinds of questions. So if you haven't checked that out yet, please check out that video first. And also remember to like and subscribe so that Richard and I can both continue to be happy souls going forward. So Richard, how are the assignments from last week?
Well, percentage of revenue by year problem, it was a little bit challenging because it really made me structure the data in a way that I've never done before. It required some thinking and really made me think of how to find the data that I need and then aggregate them in a way that would show the data in the structure that I wanted. So just the understanding how to code, that part was a little bit difficult for me. Really just because I haven't done that so far, but hopefully it'll just come with experience just to do these over and over again.
Okay. Yeah. So all I got from that was that it was challenging. So why don't we dive into that one? When we look through your struggle and actually work through it together, we'll understand exactly how much work you need to put in and we'll work through the problems together to understand that, I would say. Let's go over the SQL question first and see how it goes. You're generating a yearly report for your company's revenue sources. Calculate the percentage of total revenue to date that was made during the first and last years recorded in the table. So how do we do this?
I think first we need to aggregate the revenue by year. And I know we have a date time variable here created at, it's probably just a raw full date time string like date, month, day, year, and time. So we have to really condense that into just like a yearly aggregate of this revenue. That's the first thing I'm thinking about.
What do you mean by yearly aggregate of revenue? I think it's really helpful to just write down what you want to see from your table, right?
We sum up the amount based on year is what I'm thinking.
Okay, so basically revenue by year. Okay. So
I'm a little bit tripped up by what it means by first and last years recorded on the table. So does that mean the first year from the created at variable and the last year from the created at variable, and we ignore everything in the middle?
I guess so. I think so. Yeah, I think your assumption is right.
Okay, so I would say leave this function gives me the year of a date time variable. Not sure if this will work. Let's see what this gives me. Am I allowed to use Google?
Yeah, I'll just tell you, it's called year. The function is called year, and you wrap it around the created at.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, and then we need a sum of amount. And I'd say we have to group by year. And then as for the first and last year's part of it, I think we have to use a having clause and a max and min aggregate for the year variable. Not sure if this will work, but let's try it.
So it looks like you have just an execution error.
Column created at in having clause. Maybe this needs to be where. But I also have the wrong columns. Let's see what this gives me first.
Oh, so I'm going to tell you right now that the issue is that I don't really know if you know what you're doing. Let's go back to your query, right? What are you trying to get back from this? You're trying to get back just two rows. One that is the first year revenue. The second one is the last year revenue. So you have to use having after the group by, right? That's just standard practice. A where statement goes before a group by statement. And the second thing is that I don't think you can run aggregations in your having clause. So when you run something like max year created at is equal to year created at, that won't work. And additionally, you're also adding an and statement, which means that it has to satisfy that condition and the min year created at statement. The first thing I would say is that like you really need to understand what you're creating, what table you're creating here. So first, what I want you to do is just write by hand what the table that you want to create looks like. And when I say write by hand, I mean literally like write out the rows and columns.
Okay, so if it's only first and last year, I would say that's 2 columns with 1 row. And that 1 row will be just the total revenue for that first and last year.
Okay, so write that up.
Do you want me to like write on a piece of paper or?
No, just type it. Just like use pipe for like the columns and then use like a break for like the rows.
So I'm thinking here, last year.
Just write down some numbers, like some random numbers. Okay, cool. So that's first year revenue. That's last year revenue. Okay, cool. So that makes sense. That is kind of what the output looks like for this question as well. One more thing I would say is that look at your query. Your query doesn't look like that output at all, right?
Right.
Okay, so is that what you're trying to get from that query itself? Or is that what you think the very end output should be, like the answer to the question?
I think that because the years are rotated into columns, I need to get year as a column first, or maybe as a column, and then pivot this table to rotate it. I'm kind of doing a pre-step in that way.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, the easiest way to get around a pre-step is just to not do it at all, I would say.
Okay.
And first think about how do you go from your pre-step to this next step? And then how do you go from that next step to the final step? I would say that just missing like a few things here, right? Which is the fact that what does the output from what you want to do right now look like as well?
Say right now I have a year column and like an aggregated sum of revenue column.
Yeah, so let's go back to like, maybe let's open Google Sheets because it'll be a little bit easier to write down what you want to do for this. Let's do what you want first, right? So what are you trying to get from that query?
So my first attempt would probably look something like this: year, sum of amount, and first year, last year, and then sum here. Then I was thinking I could take this table and then rotate it so that it would be then. Yeah.
Okay. And then how do you get to the very end, which is the percentage of the total from this?
Oh, yes, the percentage.
So you don't have the total anywhere, right? And we need the
No.
total somewhere for us to calculate this.
I think it would have to be, I'd have to have another sum of revenue in there without a group by.
Okay, so just put it out in the table, like you can magically do whatever you want here, right? Because that is kind of what we're trying to achieve in SQL. And then this number will be, just make up some number for this, okay?
This final table would be this number divided by this number.
Yeah, you can see how it's a little bit harder to do it your way, which is working forwards, and how it might be a little bit easier to work backwards. In the problem itself, we state exactly what the output has to look like, right? Like if you go into like the problem, it says output, 2 columns, percent first, percent last, with a float value in each, which is representing the percentage. All right, so let's start from that first. So let's put that at the bottom. Let's go to the Google Sheet again and just write down an example of what that looks like. Cool. All right. Now, how do you get from that to that second table that you have with first year, last year as the columns?
I'm thinking we still need to do the year function wrapping created at.
No. You're moving too fast. Slow down there, cowboy. Let's go. Literally, what does the table before this table look like? So you have that on line 5, cell 5. Row 5, right? You have first year, last year. Is that all you need to get to that next one? I think you're missing one more column.
Yeah, I need a total revenue column as well.
Okay. All right. So add that column too, total revenue. Gotcha. Now we have our stepping stones. So we have the fact that you can basically use Excel right now to basically get that last column, right? Percent first, percent last, by just dividing the first year from the total, the last year from the total.
Right.
And then to get to here from your original one, you'd have to do some, basically just a pivot, right? But a pivot is pretty lame, especially because it doesn't really do any calculation for us. So instead, I would try to get you to think, how do you go from your second table to like the first table that we begin with, basically, that has all of the revenue by each row? And I would say maybe the easier statement would just be like, okay, let's say we just run that first query where you basically group by year and you get all of the revenue for every single year. Let's do that first. So that's an easy query that we both know how to do, right?
Can you say that one more time?
Revenue by year, right? So the rows are the year and then the columns are revenue. So if you go back to the problem, you basically almost had it. Actually, if you just take lines 1 and 2, you have that table that I'm talking about. So delete everything else except for lines 1 and 2. Okay, what does this give you?
It gives me 2 columns, the year and the sum of the amounts for each year.
All right, cool. And that's basically giving us all the information we need, right? So
Yes.
what I want you to do is go back to Excel and write down what that table would look like.
It would be first year, and then they would have some years between it.
And write down exactly like example data so that you can really look at it. The cells aren't going to be called first year. It's going to be like 2018 or something, right?
So let's say 2018, 2019, 2020, and then there will be, there wouldn't be a total revenue column from that. And then let's say it looks something like this.
Yep. Boom. All right. Now we're getting somewhere, right? Now, how do we get from this first table that we know how to create to that second table using SQL?
I'm thinking a pivot somehow.
Okay. Well, pivots sound hard, but maybe it's possible. How would you pivot this?
You're right. I don't know. I'm not super familiar with the pivot syntax. I'd have to do some Googling myself and try to fit that. Okay. Let's say
Let's see how this goes. So I'll tell you right now, right, that it looks like you can pivot, but the only issue is that then you'd have to know exactly what you're pivoting on. And technically, you don't know that 2018 is the first year. It doesn't have anything that says first year on it. But if we could figure out a way to figure out that 2018 was the first year, then we would be set, right? So we have to isolate 2018 as the first year somehow. How do we isolate 2018 as the first year?
I think I'd still use the min year function, like wrap year created at in min.
So let's do that then. We wrap min year created at.
And then we'd also need a max for the last year.
Okay.
And we probably
what does this
away...
table give us? Yeah. This would just give us something different, right? So this would define us our min and max year, right? It also give us our total revenue, which is what we need. Try running it, see what happens. All right, so we got 2018, we got 2021, and we got our sum total amount of revenue. That's some of our stats that we'd actually need, right? That's actually helpful. Now, the question is, we have these 2 variables, these 3 variables that we need, but we don't have the revenue for each of them. So to get from here to the table that we just said, that middle table, we still need to figure out the revenue values for those. So you could see, like, what would you do if you had to do this by hand, basically?
I would do something like an if statement. If the year is equal to the first year, then give me the sum of revenue for that year.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. How do we encapsulate that in SQL, though?
I'm thinking case statements.
Okay.
Let me give this a try. So select case.
So it's case win. It's not case condition win. It's case win. And you're supposed to put the sum outside of the case win. The sum function wraps around the case.
Like this.
Yep.
What are you talking about? Then you would have amount. Then you know. So you're saying we aggregate outside. So it gives like the amount for every date that it falls within this year.
Yes. If you think about SQL, right? Like I'm basically saying, all right, sum, and then I'm looking at this column for this condition that you just specified. And then case when the year created at is equal to the min year created at, then amount. Well, let's see if this even runs first.
Well, I have to finish this case. So I'd say else else nothing,
Yeah, you don't
else
even have to put else.
zero.
No, you don't
Okay,
even have to put else. You just put end.
just end. And then I'd have to do the same thing for the max case.
Well, let's see if
So
this one works first.
let me try.
And you should probably start cleaning up your queries by creating like some spaces and some line breaks that naturally follow so you can see exactly where you're getting error statements. Like you can't even see the very end of yours. I would add like a break somewhere. Yeah, cool. And every single comma should be a new line break. There should be a new line break after every single comma, basically.
Oh, you're saying.
Yeah, you could do that too. It doesn't matter. You could put the comma first, comma last.
Okay.
Cool. So what happened? Didn't work. Let's look at what happened. Invalid use group by function.
Oh, forgot to group by.
What are you grouping by?
I'd have to group by year in this case.
You have to group by year.
Try.
So I think what your problem is that you can't run a min function in your case statement. Maybe you should Google it to see if that's actually valid, but I'm guessing you can't. So it looks like you already have one aggregation sum, right? And then you're trying to run another aggregation within it. That's a no-no for SQL. So what you got to do is you got to figure out a way to get that min year value without doing it within your case function.
So do I need a temporary table in this case?
Yeah.
So using a with statement?
A subquery CTE is probably a better
subquery.
So yeah, use a with statement. That would work.
So say with a I'm not sure if this will work, but let's try it. Nope, I don't think this is right.
Why is that not right? Go back.
I have two columns in this temporary table that is first year and last year.
Okay, what's wrong with that?
I don't know, it just doesn't make sense now that I think about it. Does it?
But again, visualize what table do you want? What do you want to see out of the SQL queries that you're writing? This is always the most important part.
I guess I do want a table that has one row and each row is one first year and one last year.
Each column is first year and last year, right?
Yes.
Okay, that sounds good. Now, what's wrong with that query right now? It's a simple fix, but why are you running a group by statement if you only want one row?
I thought you had to use group by with any aggregation function. But
nope. You only need to group by something if you need the min value for each thing that you're grouping by. So if I want the min amount, the transaction per year, then I would group by the year and I do min on amount. If I only want the lowest year that exists in this table, then I can just run min, create it at, and get the first year. And that's what you did actually in the very beginning, right? You got the min, you got the first year, you got the last year, and you got the total amount. And did you run a group by for that one? I don't think so.
Okay. Let me try it with that then.
All right. So now what happens? So let's try running this. Well, it's not going to run, but you have a table that has the first year and the last year. And now you need to get those values into this other query that you have. How do you do that?
I tried doing that with a select first year from A.
Okay. Did it work?
It did not work.
By running it again.
So I have a syntax error on line 7. So this did not work.
So it looks like you can't run a select statement within maybe a case when, even though I don't know if that's entirely true, to be honest. Why don't we try joining it to the table instead? Instead, you could basically be like, all right, I know the first year and the last year. Now I want to filter this payments table so that I only get the values that exist for the first year and the last year. Or I only get the values in one column and that are from the first year and the last year.
So you're saying that we need to just get this sum amount without the max and min and then join at the end here? Like we have a join here.
So no, what I'm saying is that like you have this table, right? You have this variable called first year, right? If we left join it, if we do from annual payments and we left join it to the table on only the values where it's equal to the first year. So we do like a dot created at the year of the created at in all of this annual payments table is equal to the first year. We only get all of the values that exist in the first year. Does that make sense? And then if we sum all those values, then we get the revenue for only those values in the first year.
I think I understand.
You think you understand? All right. So let's say you have all of the payments, right, on the left table, right? And then you have this value, which you know is the first year. It's 2018, right? And I'm going to every single transaction and I'm going, is this payment from 2018? Yes. Is this payment from 2018? Yes. Is this payment from 2018? No. And then that way, when you left join it, then the only values that are going to exist on the right side of the table are going to be from 2018 when they match up to those transactions. So now you have a really good indicator for which values are from 2018. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, but I'm not sure what I'm joining on this annual payment side because
All right.
I have this year variable in A, and then but I don't have the year in this annual payments table.
Why don't you have the year in the annual payments table? You just did it right there. Year created
So
at,
you're saying
right? Like what happens when you call that year function on every single created at row?
you're right. I'd have every single year, but
There you go.
so it would join. Are you saying something like this?
Think about how you did it above. Like you just have to copy that exact same syntax. So when you run that case when year created at, why is that any different than when you're doing the join statement down below?
It's not if you're saying this part.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But you are trying to reference the table before it. It doesn't need to be referenced, is what I'm saying, because you didn't reference it at the top. So this is going to be exactly the same. So you have the year created at, and then it's equal to. All right, cool. Awesome. One issue is that if you do an inner join, which is what you're doing right now, you're only going to get the values from our 2018, right? That's not really what we want because we also want the last year as well. So one more thing you could do here is you could then just left join it. So that way we are still keeping all our values in the annual payments table. Now let's do this again on the last year.
Do a second left join.
Yep. But you can't reference the same table twice, so you have to change the name, the alias of it.
What do you mean?
I can't join A twice, so you have to understand which one is which. Like if I join A twice, right, then you have to call it another table, essentially.
How do I change the name of a table? Like
how do you do it right now with at the very top on line 1?
So you're saying I need a second temporary table?
No, I'm not saying second table. You just need a new alias, right? Like how do you call something different? You do A as, and you call it something else.
Let's see.
Okay.
Like this.
Yeah. All right, now let's go back to the top. So now what you can do, basically, when you do sum case when year created at, then amount. So you've already done this join, right? So basically, all you have to do is basically when sum case when A dot first year is not null, which means that it joined correctly to the payments table, then sum that amount and we'll get the revenue for that year. No, it's going to be case when A dot first year is not null.
And I don't need this anymore.
Now let's see what happens. You still have a group by in there that you don't need.
I don't need this. Okay.
Run your code. See what happens. All right, cool. So now we have first year revenue, last year revenue, and total revenue. See that?
Okay. Yes.
Awesome. Now we're just one step away, and that's what I'm going to make for your assignment coming up next week. And also one thing I want to say is that, Richard, you have to do your homework. Otherwise, we're going to be just going through this step by step, and I'm going to be teaching you this way instead of you just learning from your homework. So if you don't do your homework next lesson, we're not doing it anymore. And you're not going to get that six-figure data science job.
Okay. I wouldn't have thought about this problem this way, if I'm being honest. I wouldn't.
Which is why we should do the SQL course, right? Like I would love for you to check out the SQL course and do your homework. So your homework assignment going forward is to check out the SQL learning path on Interview Query. So if you go to the top, so learning path, SQL. Oh yeah. Here we go. So it's time to look through and learn all the way up to medium SQL. You don't have to do it in 1 week, but I do think that this is a good litmus test for understanding exactly where you start getting confused as you start doing harder and harder problems. And that's where we can really dive in, and you can go through and try the problem and be like, all right, this is where I got stuck. This is the concept that I got stuck at. It looks like you did 30% already, which is great, but most of that is in the introduction section. Done.
I skipped around a little bit.
Okay. Cool. Well, next lesson, we can dive more into it. All right, next week, getting better at SQL, learning about A/B testing and experiment design. This is a slow progression towards becoming a master data scientist. Richard, how are you feeling?
Well, after that SQL problem, I think I have a little bit of work to do. Just, wrapping my brain around how to think about SQL problem.
It was a hard problem. Probably a
problem.
harder problem because it utilized so many concepts that you didn't know yet. But it's a good litmus test for what you don't know. We found out that you didn't know how to kind of properly do a left join with a case statement, right? We found out that you were a little confused by group bys and havings and exactly where statements might go between wheres and havings. All of this is stuff that you learn when you do more and more problems, but it kind of shows, the limits of your knowledge right now, which is a good thing to understand, because now we kind of have you benchmarked at this level of around like probably easy to medium SQL questions. And if we start getting into subqueries, it might get more and more difficult. So that's kind of where I think the next kind of step is like, now we've benchmarked your SQL skills. Let's try moving on to like another domain next week and figure out where you are with like analytics and maybe case studies and A/B testing as well. And then we can keep on going to more and more and farther and farther. But feel humbled by the power of SQL today and use that to harness some more motivation towards getting better at it over the next few months. Yeah?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Also, let us know what you think in the comments. Is Jay too harsh of a SQL teacher? Does Richard need to do more homework? What do you guys think? We want your hot takes. See you guys next time.